Hello YouTube, Archaea here, and I'm going to talk to you about the enclosures that we use for our terrestrial and fossorial tarantulas. So, as you can see here, we are using Sterilite bins. They're a relatively good price. I think we got these for about $12 each, which isn't that bad in the long run, especially since they're very clean and just easy to use. So, as you can see, we're marking dots with a Sharpie and a ruler, just trying to get it as neat as possible. Of course, it's not always going to be completely perfect because these Sterilite bins are not perfectly flat, but we do our best and we work relatively well as a team, so it's pretty solid. I typically go with 2 inches because that's the size of the vents that I use. And then as you can see, I have a hole saw, or a Dremel tool, if I recall. I believe it's called a Dremel tool. Please don't eat me alive in the comments because I forgot. And I'm just wearing that mask mostly for eye protection. You definitely don't want to get plastic shot directly into your eyes. It is not pleasant at all. So definitely use eye protection. So when it comes to drilling the hole through the plastic, you definitely want to apply the right amount of pressure. Too little and you won't really get anywhere and you might skid off to the side, and too hard and you might crack it. I've done both a couple times, so I've had a little bit of practice, so I did manage to get a pretty perfect circle here. Very proud of myself. And I have weak little pansy fingers, so I need to protect them when I go to take off the plastic. Of course, there's multiple ways you can do it. If you don't mind a couple scuffs, you can also use a serrated knife just to get it off. It's more so you don't hurt yourself on it, and so it's a little bit more stable and flat. If you can just use your fingers, then by all means, but I can't. I have very soft little fingers. And I don't really mind the scuff marks that much. But I can understand if you don't like them. So, I'm just wiping out the plastic from the inside. It does fly everywhere, and we just sort of sweep it up after. We don't want to be leaving plastic inside the enclosures after all. And here we have a vent. I just got them off of Amazon. I think they were about $16 for a box of 18. I'll leave a link in the description below to the specific vents that I ordered. And I got metal because a lot of the larger tarantulas will be able to chew through plastic. And these ones are just very stable and relatively cheap, and they work fairly well. As you can see, I pulled out the little nub there. So I start off by pulling one out. Also just kind of showing you how to do it. It's very easy. Just get a little butter knife. And then I just plop it right in. Make sure that the tool you use to drill is the same diameter as the vent that you get. And on the inside, I just open it up, spin it, then open up that third one. It's quite strong. Even the strongest tarantulas shouldn't be able to push that out, so long as you have it sized properly. And I use frog tape for a lot of my labeling because it's very easy to remove, but if you use Sharpie on it, it won't smudge, which is very convenient, so I don't ever have to have any permanent words on any of my bins, which I like because sometimes things have to be moved around, and, well, I just think it also looks fairly nice too. So as you can see, I'm going to be putting a Platyomma in here, and she is beautiful. And the 0.1.0 just references to the fact that it's a female. 1.0.0 means a male. 0.0.1 means unsexed. Now, I normally use scissors to do this, so it's clean, but they were all dirty, and oops. So it's a little bit messy, but I'm sure the Platyomma will not mind. At least I hope not. We do feed her, after all. A little messy. So here I have a brick of cocoa fiber. It's a pretty decent substrate. You can also get smaller ones, the plantation soil, if you don't need to use a giant brick like we did. Same stuff. So I just sort of expand it out, and you know, you add liquid and let it expand outwards, and then I put that in there and just made a little layer. And I also added some vermiculite just to kind of help retain moisture. Very, very useful. Very useful. Especially for the higher humidity species. I also use sphagnum moss to help retain humidity. It's pretty fantastic because most of the time you don't need to keep the soil wet in a lot of enclosures. I find that that contributes towards mold growth, and also tarantulas don't necessarily want to be living in a super damp environment, but they still require humidity. And sphagnum moss is a great way to distribute humidity within the tank, because humidity is not in the soil, it's in the air. And this is great at holding moisture. You also want to make sure you take out any of the sticks that you might find in sphagnum moss. That I find tends to mold. But the actual sphagnum moss itself does a fairly good job of not molding and just holding onto moisture pretty well. So as you can see, for a hide, I have a half a solo cup. I think it's pretty self-explanatory how you cut that in half. And I generally put sphagnum around the hide. It just sort of helps keep it helps keep the hide a little bit more humid, which typically the tarantulas like without having it being wet. I also use these little takeout sauce cups and tattoo ink cups for water dishes, so they have some water to drink out of. I have witnessed a lot of my tarantulas drinking, so I do feel like it is something that you should supply. Not all of your tarantulas may use it, but some might, and I think that it's good to give your pets, or just animals in general, a good environment. And so here I have tongs. They're Gator brand tongs, and they have rubber tips. Very, very helpful because tarantulas like to bite, and you don't necessarily always want them biting straight onto metal. It could break their fangs, and that's just not good for them. So here's the Platyomma, and we're just gonna try and scooch her out a little bit. I also typically use the back to move them, just so that there's no way that they could get pinched. But I use the other side of the tongs typically for feedings, because that's usually when they're trying to lunge out. And there she is. Poor little thing and her little stress ball. But it's been, I think, about a month since I actually filmed this. And she's doing a lot better now. She's very active and likes to waddle around. She doesn't really use her hide. I always see her outside, but she's also a fairly large tarantula, so I'm not super surprised. Aww. At some point I'll have to revisit her and show you more of her because she is beautiful. And there we have it. We have her up with a lot of our others. As you can see, it's just sort of like a nice streamlined area, and quite happy with it. I hope this video helped in some way.